Welcome to today's Politics and Tactics. We got a great show. My new co-host for today is Deputy Chief Brian Sky Eagle from the Houston Fire Department. It's an honor to have him on. We were interviewing him on our last show, and time got cut a little short. But we also have Greg Barta on, who's the PIO for Orange County Fire Authority. And I've been following them on Twitter, and some of the stuff that they're doing to get the word out and how they frame and how they sell the fire department to the public, I think is cutting edge. And we're going to be talking to Greg. So, Greg, feel free to interject when we're talking to Brian. And we'll start off with Chief Sky Eagle. Everybody, welcome to Politics and Tactics. On behalf of Bobby Halton and Fire Engineering, we're glad that you joined us today. Chief Sky Eagle, one of the things that we've talked about in the past was the Houston Fire Chiefs Association. Could you explain your role in that and kind of give us the nuts and bolts?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. So the HFD, or the Houston Fire Department's Chief Officers Association, is really no different from, let's say, LA City Chief Officers and
Brian just froze. Oh, there we go.
Chief Officers.
Go ahead, Brian. You're back. Your feed froze for a second.
Okay. And it's really about leadership and management. It's not really different from a lot of the other ones. We engage with the administration, and we kind of play that intermediary between the labor union and the labor force, and then the administration. We are the managers. We are the upper management that has to carry out a lot of these agreements and things of that nature. So about a year ago, about a dozen chiefs got together, and we decided to start the organization as a way to improve communication amongst ourselves, to improve our practices with each other. That component seemed to be missing. And we just had our monthly meeting on Monday, and it was really, really good. We had about a dozen chiefs show up, and we're talking about the administration's possible changes to our drivers for chiefs. So we think this is a good conversation to have with the labor unions, with the administration, and bringing people together.
Now, do you find that this helps with continuity of command, of getting all the chiefs together kind of in an informal setting and then being able to advocate as one voice?
Absolutely. You see that in our meetings, and we do Zoom meetings as well, but you can see the camaraderie just kind of rise to the top, and that translates into our operational relationships. So when we're all on the same page in an informal setting, those practices and procedures we carry out on the job greatly enhance. And I think it improves overall morale, because you're working with people that you know personally. You know, like we have about 90 chiefs in just operations on 4 different shifts. So you don't know everybody right off the bat. And this is a good way to get to know those people.
And in most places, and I'll ask Greg, I know when I worked in New Haven, we used to say there's 4 different fire departments, because every shift, and when you're talking to individuals who work in even larger cities, each battalion sometimes seems like a different fire department. So can you speak a little bit to that, and then we'll have Greg weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We experienced the same thing. We got 4 different fire departments depending on shift, and then when you break that down to our 21 districts, we got 21 more fire departments, and then you break that down to their particular stations. So there's a cultural continuity that we're trying to capture and manage, right? So the chief officers, we're exploring different things that the mayor's coming out, which really get the officers together. We just opened it up to officers because our board of directors opened up. There was such a demand for officers in addition to chiefs, so we're exploring that. But how we come together to discuss issues like the vaccination policy they're going to come out with, our driver operators for chiefs, and social engagement. So we provide a network of people. And more recently, we're going to try to have the fire chief on from Dallas, because they have a peak ambulance service they just implemented. And so we want to bring him to speak to our chiefs about how they're doing that, how they're staffing that model, and things like that. So it's a growing organization, but we had such a great start off. We hope to continue that, because we really see the camaraderie between the chiefs. And when we up here have the right message and unified in our message, that helps the department in the city, and definitely the firefighters all together.
Greg, you got a question?
No, just I can totally relate to that. Obviously, we're a big organization, 77 fire stations, 11 battalions, and we interact with a lot of other smaller agencies, and we kind of call our different areas. We have the West End, we have South County, and those different areas kind of operate. We're all on the same page, but there's, different socioeconomic areas, a little bit of different operational mentality, especially when we deal with the other organizations we're working with. So our chiefs do the same thing as you, Chief Sky Eagle. We have good working relationships with all those various agencies we interact with to make sure we're on the same page when that incident does occur.
Brian, how were you received by the chief of department when this organization came about? Does he participate in the organization?
So we're new. He definitely, we speak from time to time. He actually invited us to a press conference about some budgeting and things that the mayor were going to do. We represent officers as well, so we're always in that conversation. I think it's been a very positive reception. We actually did an arbitration or pre-arbitration where we were able to settle it, and it went really well. So we're actually trying to bring in a new way of mediating and some alternative disputes that we have within the department using the Chief Officers Association. So Chief Pena was great. He welcomed us, he invited us to places, and it's been a good, positive reception.
Your chief's a consummate professional, and we love to see all the stuff that you guys are doing in Houston. Now, something that you said that I think is great. So your association is actually branching out and bringing in, when you see something innovative, you're bringing somebody in to give training to all of the chiefs. Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. One of our missions and our goals is education. And that's not just meaning higher education, but that's also meaning education within your trade. And we get that through looking outside. We look to LA, we look to New York, we look to Dallas. I went to the Homeland Security program they have in Monterey, and I met Fernando Gray. He's now the fire chief of Aurora, Colorado. So the issue with that, I want to talk to him about is recently some paramedics were hit with criminal charges for potentially or allegedly malpractice. Now, that's something new. As a lawyer, that really grabs my interest about how these guys get charged with criminal charges for what seems to be a civilian malpractice type thing. That's really intriguing. So we hope to have him on in the near future. But to answer your question, absolutely, that we go outside the fire department, our own fire department. There's a lot of good people doing some innovative things, and we want to capture that, especially from from the management part. That was the one component that I think, not just me, but the other chiefs that put this organization together, that we identified, and that was the development at the top levels of operations in particular.
What I like to see is here, Houston is a highly respected fire department. You're the 4th largest city in America. And so for all our viewers out there, if Houston is looking to the outside, no matter what size fire department you have, we all benefit by talking to each other. And I think that that's one of the great things of FDIC and fire engineering is that we all acknowledge that we all have something to learn. And one of the things that I think is great about reaching outside is sometimes you can talk without the emotion. You can kind of give a scenario to somebody without the names because they don't know the person. That person's not going to betray your trust and say, hey, I heard this about this situation. You could kind of bounce things back and forth. Do you find that to be the case as you build these relationships?
Absolutely. We do that regularly, right? So I want to mention something. All the major cities have some type of organization like this. If you look at New York, they have the uniformed officers. If you look at LA, they have the LA city chiefs. And I think Chicago has something like that. So being the 4th one, we kind of explored why aren't we doing that? How come we're not developing the officers and the chiefs at that level? And then more importantly, like you said, once we start engaging in these conversations, because we have a different set of interests. We're looking at discipline. We look at procedural justice. We look at, as managers and leaders of the department, what we do matters, and it affects the firefighters. It affects the overall morale of the department. And if we can do better, we can then go forward and have the department do better as a whole. But we do find, and we just reached out to a couple of other chiefs. I know other chiefs come in from neighboring agencies. That thing that you're talking about, this dialogue that happens, no emotion. No, we don't get into the negative spin on things, but we're trying to solve a problem. We're trying to understand what they do. And there's a lot of good chiefs and officers that have really good ideas that help us expand our way of thinking.
I think that's phenomenal. Now, we have Greg Barta here, who's a captain in Orange County Fire Authority, who's the PIO. And can you explain how the PIOs work, just kind of 30,000 foot view in Houston? Because I'm sure there's going to be some differences, and that might help highlight some things here today.
Sure. Me in Houston?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a PIO, and they handle, all the messaging when it comes to incidences and big or small, but they also have assistant PIOs. And in particular, this unique to Houston, which may apply to Orange County, is the bilingual element part of it, right? So we have people out here that can speak Spanish, that will talk to the Spanish TV shows and the Spanish radios. And so that's why you have different people. But we're a little bit different. I don't know how it works in Orange County, but it's a little bit different here, where if it's operational and it's a big incident, our deputies and chiefs tend to do the media conferences on that because they're more knowledgeable about what's going on. But when it comes to when it's higher priority, when there's politics in play and things like that, our assistant chiefs will step in and speak for the department. So, and then if it's somewhere in between that, the PIO can definitely decide for himself that, how he wants to do that. I know our PIO handles all of our social media messaging for the department. I think they do a phenomenal job. They do it in both languages, and it's very current and it's very thorough. So the PIO program is part of, because we actually speak to the PIO when we go out, especially if I have to go to the hospitals and check on injured firefighters. This is a message we got to get the facts right. We got to have a lot of people come question. So the PIO is a very important component of that discussion, and to find out what's the proper person to give the message. That's the conversations we have.
Do you guys have I know you said you have assistant PIOs. Is there one individual who's like the main head PIO for the organization?
Yeah, so that's Chief Galvan right now. He's a deputy chief in inspection. He's got the right demeanor. He's a nice guy. He speaks well. Very easy to understand. So Chief Pena, I think, appointed him last year, if I'm not mistaken. But he has assistants in there, so it's been a very good process.
One thing that I think is real important is the fact is reaching out to all communities that the fire service serves. And I think it shows respect for the community. And I also think that firefighters are also all bilingual, because I worked in a predominantly Ecuadorian neighborhood in Fairhaven for years, and I didn't speak any Spanish, but I treated every individual that we ever crossed with respect. And when there was that language difficulty, I could usually find a child to help interpret. But if you don't speak the language, if you show that you honestly care and you show that respect, it really builds a bond between the community. So I think that that's huge that you're putting stuff out in English and Spanish. And to put a little bit of American history, when people say, well, it's America, so everybody should speak American. Now, I say this as a conservative. If you look back to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution for that matter, when they were originally published, the copies were published in German and a few other languages as well, because in Pennsylvania, we had a huge German population who couldn't read English. And the founders knew that it was important to reach out to all Americans, that we need to get everybody to buy into this experiment, this great experiment as America. And they made sure that those founding original documents, the original copies were made. There's one at the Beinecke Rare Book Library in New Haven of the Declaration of Independence in German, or the Constitution in German. So, and a lot of people don't, that's kind of a lost bit of history. Have you ever heard that? I'll ask Brian first, because he's the lawyer.
No, I haven't heard of that, but this is why we do this, right? Because I learn something new every day. So thanks for sharing that.
Too bad Bobby loves history. Greg, did you know that our founding documents were printed in different languages? It's kind of
like the chief just said. I just learned something new today too. No clue.
It's been lost to time, and nobody talks about it. And yet I think that's so important. And that's the one thing that the fire service does better than any other agency. There's no government agency that does what the fire department does. Someone calls 911 and we just show up with 4 people with the only goal to help and with no paperwork. what government agency can we may have paperwork on our end, but the public doesn't get any paperwork? So one of the things about getting the message out, and Greg, I'm going to let you kind of give an overview first. Like, give us an overview of everybody knows where Houston is, and because of Yale, everybody knows what New Haven is. But Orange County Fire Authority, is it in Orange County, Florida? I mean, California?
Yeah, so we're in Orange County, California. So basically, we're sandwiched right in between San Diego and LA. So we're right in between those two major media markets. I mean, everybody knows where San Diego is, everybody knows where LA is, and we're literally right in the middle of them. It's about a 20-minute drive and you're in city of Los Angeles, you know, and a 30-minute drive, you're down to San Diego. So right in the middle. Obviously
I didn't see you on Real Housewives, did I?
Well, I did a pretty good job of hiding in the background on that. So that's probably our most famous thing, right? The Real Housewives of Orange County.
we got to get you on that. So give us a little background of the actual fire department itself.
Yeah, so I mean, very similar to Houston, I'm assuming. You know, major all hazard organization, 77 fire stations. We serve roughly 2 million residents across 23 cities. So, I mean, we're a little bit, you know, smaller than like LA City or LA County, but a very similar service delivery model. I mean, basically in the fire service, anything you can think of, we do. Every specialty program, I mean, literally everything under the sun, helicopters, hazmat, wildland, swift water. I mean, you name it, we've got it, which is a big drawing factor for a lot of firefighters. We get a lot of firefighters that come to us from other agencies looking to really take their career in a multitude of directions. That's one of the best things here that we offer. So again, just very similar to those large organizations. Which we're very fortunate, you know, I'm very fortunate to be able to work for an organization like this where, you know, you truly can take your career in any path you want.
Now, the rank structure is different in California. In some places, you know, in Maryland, they have sergeants. You were saying in California before we got on today that the rank structure goes firefighter, engineer, captain. Is that correct?
Yeah. So firefighter, engineer, captain, then battalion chief, division chief, so on and so forth. So there's no lieutenant here. I know LA City has a captain and then a captain two. All of our captains are equal in status. There's no differentiation. So that's our rank structure.
Brian, in Houston, how's your rank structure work?
So we go firefighter, engineer operator, captain, and then senior captain. And then we cross to district chief and then deputy chief.
Oh, okay. So a little bit difference there too.
And our equivalent, so we have equivalents. Let's say you're a captain rank in inspection. You have to be those, you know, you cross from engineer operator to the officer level as you go to some supporting areas. But we refer to them either as investigator or inspector, senior investigator, senior inspector. Even though they're the equivalent of a captain and a senior captain, we kind of identify them by their titles. You can tell what division that's associated with.
And inspection, when you say inspection, you're kind of talking about like the fire marshal's office?
Correct. We got the arson, the fire marshal's office, and then we got, well, EMS is a big juggernaut in itself. But what's interesting is I've always wondered why we get senior captain. Why didn't we follow the traditional lieutenant and captain, right? And from what I was told was they did not want something less than a captain running the stations. So they wanted to have that captain rank at the station. So they come up with captain and senior captain. And the senior captains are on the ladder trucks. That's where their positions are in operations.
And it's really kind of the same thing, because if you look at lieutenants and captains in most departments across the country, the job description is actually almost identical. And I've had politicians say, well, what's the difference? And it generally comes down to experience, knowledge, and training is the difference, but it's a senior captain in a sense. So I can respect that. That makes perfect sense. Now, so Greg, were you on the line before you became the PIO, or how did that work? Did you go from firefighter to PIO?
No. So to be a PIO here, you have to be a captain, off probation as a captain, obviously. And then we kind of changed things about a year and a half ago. So I think probably similar to your organization, Chief Eagle, we had one individual who was the PIO. It was a captain spot. And I don't want to say it was a miserable position, but if you had little kids or anything like that, you did not want to be the PIO. I mean, you were the one individual responsible for our whole organization. you pretty much were always on. We kind of realized, hey, there's a better way to do things where it's better for both the employee and the organization. So we swapped to a shift schedule about 18 months ago, and we flew a flyer. We had to interview for it. Anybody that was a captain and off probation was eligible. So a handful of us interviewed, and then they selected 3 of us to be the 3 shift PIOs. So we have ABC shift. There's 1 PIO for each. We're here, 24 hours a day. And then we have what we call backup PIOs, which we utilize basically if one of us calls in sick and we need somebody to backfill. That way we always have PIO coverage. And then we had 3 major wildfires in Orange County just last year alone. So we were able, we needed more than one of us, obviously. So we were able to utilize all those backups as PIOs to come in and help with major incident. So it's awesome that the organization did that. And we've seen, the benefits have been tenfold since going to the shift schedule.
So let me ask you, Greg, speaking of that, with your backups and your on shift, do all y'all get trained to participate in like the JIC centers and things like that? Because you mentioned wildland where you're going to start crossing over into jurisdictions. Do y'all develop them to go sit in some of these multi-agency, joint information centers and things like that?
That's a great question. So one of the things when you become a PIO here, obviously we have our initial onboard training that we as an organization provide. And then within your first year, you're required to take like L952 or S203, the PIO classes, right, where you get that basic level of training so you can open a task book. Obviously, you out here, West Coast, we're really big on the wildland. So we want to be able to open those task books. And then we do, like last year, we had those 3 major incidents, and we were able to pick people and sent one up, to, we call it the EOC, up on the hill here, and kind of work with the county. So we were able to put people in those different positions to get them the experience so that, next year or this year, if a major emergency happens, we have a multitude of people that, okay, we've got these 5 individuals are trained. Okay, we need one of them up there. Boom, go. Okay, we need one down here at the command post. All right, you function down here. Okay, you 2 stay, and we'll have you in the field. So it's definitely, and we put a priority on it. Absolutely.
We just went through Hurricane Nicholas, or Tropical Storm Nicholas. I think that when it hit landfall, it was a Cat 1. But the city did a phenomenal job setting up a joint information center with multi-agencies because we didn't know how it was gonna go. And this was the first time I really spent more time with the JIC because I had to give a report to the mayor in the morning. So we exchange information, what the fire department's doing, what the police, and what the big one is public works. We have a very good relationship with public works about using high water vehicles, AKA dump trucks, for their things to transport people and equipment. So there's a relationship there that we definitely have to get on the same page. And we do that through the JIC Center as far as getting our messaging and how we're going to do that. But we're just coming into that. So these deputy chiefs, we are starting to get trained in more PIO work because we're sitting at those levels. But it's the assistants or your backup PIOs that we have down at headquarters. Like you mentioned, Greg, they are always on call. When I'm on shift, I hear all the pages go off. They're running all over the city, or they're contacting. So I can definitely present that to Chief Binions. I'll say, hey, this may be a good idea to get them on shift instead of having 1 or 2 people take all the pages.
Honestly, it's the way to do it. We've been actually contacted by a few. San Diego City Fire Department recently reached out inquiring about, hey, so you guys did this transition. What did that look like? How did you do it? How's it working? Obviously, there's budget's always, probably the biggest issue when you want to make a change like that. But it just, we're always available. So there's no lag time. It's literally like being on an engine or a truck. Boom, bell goes off. We're on that call. So we're able to make a bigger difference being there sooner, and getting the information out timely, accurate. That's what it's all about. So I would strongly recommend it.
That's great.
How did you guys develop your relationships for the 3 shift officers with the press, and has there been challenges with keeping those relationships with COVID?
Yeah, so when we transitioned to this new shift position, it literally, we transitioned. We had our first all hands meeting and orientation session, and that same day, COVID basically broke out, and our executive management team broke off and started dealing with, hey, so there's this new thing. We're not really sure what it's going to look like for us. How are we going to deal with it? So we've kind of come about with the new program along with COVID, like the exact same time frame. So there are some challenges. I mean, it works well. We all have developed relationships with the various reporters, especially the local ones. But like anything, right? Human nature. There are certain reporters that have a better rapport with me. We hit it off. We get along better. There are certain ones that have a better relationship with the A shift or C shift PIO. So inevitably, a lot of times the same reporters will always reach out to me, and to the other individuals, on the other shifts. And so, I may be off. So it is somewhat of a challenge, but we made them all aware, and we remind them, hey, we're here a third of the time basically, and we have our work phones, and on our messaging system, we give the number, dial this number if you need immediate assistance, and it forwards you to whoever the on-duty PIO is. But it's a challenge. We try and overcome that by meeting up with them, doing Zoom sessions, just getting to know one another, which obviously, I'm sure, Chief, you would agree with this. It helps when we're on a working incident to kind of have that familiarity, that face. Then when we meet up, like, oh, that's reporter so-and-so. I know them. I kind of know how they operate. I kind of know how they do things. Kind of know how they're going to question things. And I mean, let's be real, right? The news,
give you a fair
they want a
shake,
good
right?
story. Right. They want a good story. And like, you kind of see how the different reporters operate. So you kind of are able to anticipate, how an interview may go. Some dig a little deeper, some not as much, some ask a lot more poignant questions, some let you free flow. So, it's definitely a work in progress at all times. And I bet, Chief, you could probably definitely relate / agree to this, that there's also turnover. I know one of our shift PIOs is going to be taking the battalion chief test in a couple months. So if he's successful, we're going to bring somebody new into the mix. And now what's that look like? So, those reporters don't know who that individual is. They've got to develop a relationship. So it's, like anything, you just got to adapt and change. And Chief, how do you guys deal with that when there's change in the PIO position for you guys?
Well, there's some of that where they'll bring him on. But how he exactly does it, our PIO changes. I'm getting a call over there. That might be one of them. That's a city phone. But to answer your question, each PIO handles that differently. Some he does succession training, which I think is what you're alluding to, where they'll start bringing them out, introducing them, get the faces out there. Some will be an internal education process. Yeah, I did want to ask you, though, you mentioned task books. And is that something you guys create yourselves for your own individual way of doing that? Or is there a standard one you use? Is there continuing education that you guys give yourself? Because I know how social media changes. I know how messaging changes. Is that something you guys continue to do in your department?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the task book I'm referring to it's for the, incident management teams out here in California.
Okay.
So if you want to be on, you guys are familiar with it, I'm sure. If you want to be on an incident management team here in California, a Forest Service or a Cal Fire team, you have to open a task book, has to be signed off. You have to go on incidents to get the sign off. So that is the task book I'm referring to. Okay. We don't have an internal task book for PIO. We do for like our rookie firefighters and other positions, not for PIO. And then, I mean, you hit the nail on the head though. There's a constant need for training social media changes. I don't know, you blink and there's new algorithms, there's new ways to reach people, right. And what's the most efficient, what's the best way to reach our target audience, because our target audience is different than, the New England Patriots target audience. So we have a robust training section, and they've got a good budget that allows for us to go seek out training opportunities. And our organization's great. I got to give them credit at, all right, what do we need? What do you guys need to be successful? Okay, you need to go to this class. Okay, let's get you guys that class.
Is there a PIO association like they have for safety officers and arson investigators?
No, not a formal. There is the group of us, and we do training together. And we are always in constant communication with one another. Just, hey, this is kind of something new coming down the pipe. This is maybe the way we want to take things. This is how we want to present things. Nothing formal though at this point. One thing we recently did, we hired a PR manager, and that was a pretty big move for us. she is like an expert with, I mean, social media this day and age is probably the biggest way that we're able to keep the communities we serve informed. I mean, if we're being real, that's everybody, when you look around, everybody's staring at their phone. You go out to a restaurant. I mean, that everybody's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And so that is our biggest way, or one of our biggest ways for reaching out. And we hired a PR manager, and she is a wizard when it comes to social media. I mean, she'll tell you the algorithms and, okay, we're going to do this post. It needs to be on a Friday. Okay, so the optimal time on Instagram is at 10:30. The optimal time on Facebook is at noon. And it really, I mean, it's crazy. It's way above my level. But that's helped us a lot. And she keeps us in tune with kind of, hey, here are the new things coming down the pipe. Here's the most optimal way for us to reach our audience. And,
So
and
what
like you said,
So what you're telling us here at Fire Engineering is that you're going to get together with her and write a joint article on optimizing social media for fire engineering, because we would love.
hey,
Bobby's not here, so I'll take some liberties. We would love to publish that, because
okay,
a lot of departments across the country, you guys are very fortunate, Houston and Orange County Authority. But if you look across America, a lot of departments don't have a PI. They'll have somebody that they appoint as a PIO at an incident, but they don't have the benefit of having someone on shift as their dedicated PIO. So I think your experience would offer a lot to America. Is that something you'd be willing to do?
100%. And the big thing with it too is, like you were saying, Chief, I mean, we handle our social media, like our social media, our PR manager, she will do more of the like campaign stuff, like drowning prevention campaign or wildfire preparedness. She kind of handles and orchestrates that stuff. We handle the incidents. We handle the, personalization of us, where we have a thing called Firefighter Friday, where we highlight one of the members of our organization and we try and personalize it. So instead of, oh, that's Chief Eagle and his uniform, he's a chief. It's, hey, this is Chief Eagle, and hey, here's a little background on him. Here's a little bit about his family. We put some personal pictures. We want to personalize us, and so things like, we handle all of that with her, input and expertise on, the timing. Hey, this day is probably more optimal to do, a more personalization story. So there's a lot that goes into that. And like you said, Frank, I mean, it takes a lot of time to do a post. As crazy as it is, even like a fire post that you put together, and I'm talking like a basic one with pictures. I mean, you put a lot of thought, obviously, into what you're writing, because let's face it, we don't want to sound unintelligent and write something that sounds like my 5-year-old wrote it. It wants to be well put together, well thought out. It's not like an instant, oh, let me put something together and 30 seconds later you throw it out there. So I definitely, I mean, we'd be willing to, help come up with some guidelines or, write something for you guys. But I mean, I don't know how some of the organizations that don't have a dedicated PIO, it's a challenge. That's a big ask.
I like how you were talking about personalizing it and highlighting a firefighters. I know that the Jets were horrible at football, but when Rex Ryan was there, he was pretty good at PR. And whenever he had an interview, he would always try to mention a player and a coach. So it wasn't just about him. It was about the organization, and it was a way to mentor and build people. So I think that's a pretty good model that you're highlighting a firefighter each week. How's it been received by the press?
Oh, it's one of the, I mean, especially when you track it on social media, and that's a big one. Our PR manager does. She has a system in place using an app, and she basically is able to track our engagement in any parameter. So day to day, month to month, year to year, week to week, however we want to look at things, she's able to track that for us. And so she can show, okay, this month we had a 32% increase in impressions and 27% increase in following on this platform. We had a decrease on this platform. She can track everything. And then the coolest thing, and this is more like a management standpoint, is she's able to assign a dollar value to that. So she can actually, based on the level of engagement we get, she can generate a marketing value that if we were to basically pay for that kind of advertisement, how much it would cost the organization. And like, I know last year it was hundreds of millions of dollars in the equivalent of advertising that was created. So it's pretty cool. And it gives us that valuable tool in our, pocket to go, okay, so this is working or this isn't working. Let's tweak some things. And we try stuff, right? I mean, like you were saying, Chief Eagle, we look at what other people do, what other PIOs, what other, organizations do. Obviously, we follow all the big organizations. There are some small organizations that do some impressive stuff. And we were talking NFL, right, Frank? I mean, it's a copycat league. If something works, you're like, man, that looked really good that FDNY is doing. Like that worked. All right, let's try it. Let's see how it's received here in Orange County. So we're constantly looking to improve ourselves and looking at how other people do things, because there are great ideas floating around out there. And we've noticed some things that we do. All of a sudden, some of the smaller agencies here in our area, all of a sudden they're kind of implementing something similar. Is it coincidence that, a little bit of, hey, that worked, let's try what OCFA is doing. We see that as well. So,
Greg, you bring up a good thing that we're now really getting into, and that is about data. And you brought up the issue about when you're giving these introductions to the department, PIO has different, areas, like you mentioned. One would be crisis communications, another one would be prevention, another one would be politics or selling a department. Across that whole spectrum, though, it's interesting to see how data plays into each one of those things. When you mentioned 34% that, 18% this, that has a way of sending another message, right? When you talk about how many people do not have smoke alarms in their homes, and you can cite a statistic for that particular neighborhood or something like that. I think that engages. I think that's kind of the heart of the PIO, when you connect with them. And I think data, I know for us here, when I hear those, data works well with the message, especially when you can give them stats like that.
We had a mayor, Tony Harp, who used to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I always thought that was just kind of a great way to send that home. Now, you talked about a PR manager, and I'll go to Chief Sky Eagle after this, because I've never heard of a fire department or a city hiring a PR manager. Is this just for the fire department, or is it for the city? And is this person a civilian?
So it's just, we're basically our own entity. We're almost like our own city, because we serve 23 cities and some unincorporated areas. So it is a civilian, and it's purely for the fire department. I mean, it is just for us. Now, we obviously work with those 23 cities, with their city councils, and we have a great relationship with them. So, we will interact with the the mayors of the cities and whatnot to kind of coordinate some messaging, like Chief was saying, let's get on the same page, and we assist a lot of the cities, and, they have events, and we want to partake. We want to be out there in the community. So we do work with them, but no, she is a civilian, and she is purely our resource.
Chief Sky Eagle, have you ever heard of a fire department hiring a PR manager?
Not a fire department. I know the city has one, and we route just about everything through the cities, because that's a higher level, and they can make sure that's whatever's going to be said. Everything kind of, but when we get on the operational side, that's where the expertise or the knowledge kind of takes over. But there is a need for training for the crisis communications component. But we don't have a civilian PR or even a classified PR person. But I know the city does, the mayor's office definitely does. And so they're going to coordinate between the PIO, obviously the fire chief, and the mayor's office as far as public relations.
Dave Statter did some work for us. He appeared in our command DVD for Tactical Perspectives. And he always says, which I thought was really good, is he said, get it right, get it out first, and get it behind you. So on the sensitive issues, and we hire from the human race, and whether it's paid or volunteer, every department has personnel issues. On things that are, kind of cross that legal line, or somebody gets, somebody gets arrested off duty. How do you run that through corporation counsel? Do you run it through the chief's office? Kind of, how do you manage that as a PIO?
Yeah, so we pretty much here, anything operationally we handle. If it's anything political, or like what you're mentioning, if one of our firefighters gets into some type of a legal issue, that, I love the football terms, that gets punted. So I basically answered our number 2 chief. I answered our deputy chief of operations, and we basically have a direct line to him and or the fire chief, and we have a green light to go to either one of them. And pretty much anything political goes to the fire chief. So if there's something political that comes up, my first move is usually a text message, depending on the hour or whatever, to my boss, our deputy chief, just let them know, hey, I'm calling the fire chief right now because XYZ happened. And then we let our chief handle that. So to be honest, it's very nice for us. Keeps us away from having to answer some of those difficult questions that aren't fun to do. But yeah, that gets punted up the chain. That's above. I mean, we're maybe at the 30,000 foot level, and that's 40,000 foot. So that's above us.
Chief Sky Eagle, that keeps you out of legal trouble too, right? You're the lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. When things bubble up, either through the chain of command or through, people knowing just the grapevine, especially when it's legal stuff like arrest. When it comes up through the chain, we definitely got to punt that to the fire chief and then the assistants, and they get with the city about how they're going to respond to that in the media. But it also, there's a good reason for it about protecting your rights, and these usually start with allegations. And there is legal consequences when you give wrong information to a PIO, or when you get out there and you affect the families or you damage a reputation. All these things could cause liability to the city. So I'm with Greg on that. We need to punt it up to the experts and take the liability off of us at this level. But you're absolutely right, Frank. There are legal concerns when it's something of that nature.
Chief, I'm assuming, do you guys work with like the city's lawyers or legal team when it comes to those kind of like personnel issues or, anything of that nature that we're discussing?
Absolutely. So city legal handles different clients. The fire department is simply just a different client. And so they represent the fire department in any legal matters. I know we just had a OIG lady transferred down from New York. And I was speaking to her, and they're a little bit different. They have their own internal OIG for the fire department. I guess they're big enough and have that kind of budget that they can dedicate those resources to the department. We
Chief,
don't.
explain the acronym.
What's that?
Explain the acronym you just gave.
Oh, OIG, that's the Office of Inspector General.
Okay.
So they're the ones that, let's say like an arrest and there's an allegation that's made, there'll be a complaint. That's the component of city legal that looks for the internal, violations, internal liabilities that may have caused, but they're internal, meaning that something happened on the inside of the department, not external where it comes from the outside through a lawsuit or through an arrest. Then the city legal team would take over that. So this is just a component of city legal. But I thought the amount of how New York is structured a little bit different legally was pretty interesting. She asked me why we never had one for so long. I'm like, I don't know.
Tell them it's Texas. You just do everything right there.
That's right.
Greg, something that you said that is something that I always push back against. And I think it's a mistake a lot of PIOs make across the country. And you probably didn't even mean it. And I think you're going to agree with me on this. But what I found nationally and locally is that the person with the microphone, the reporter, when we talk about relationships with reporters, I found that you get even further when you have a relationship with the camera person. Because I found the camera person is the one who cuts the film in the car or the SUV in most cases. And they're the ones who really determine whether you look good or you don't look good. And people tend to ignore them because they're talking to the pretty face, the handsome guy or the pretty girl, and they're kind of just focused in on the reporter. It's like the pump operator. Like nobody thinks that person is really important. And then that person's the one who
so they run out of water.
Has all the power. Can you speak to that?
No, that's a great point. I always, when I'm done doing an interview, especially like on scene or whatever, I talk to everybody, talk to the camera folks. A lot of times they're the ones who are a little more friendly and will have, sometimes more of a conversation with you anyways when there's downtime. And I always walk around and go, hey, I know it's a tough job, but you got to try and make me look at least halfway decent. And you're right. I mean, they're the ones, a lot of times what they send to the actual news agency, I mean, they can do some editing there and, they can cut out like if you didn't do something so great, especially for tape stuff. I mean, if it's live, it is what it is. So you're going to reap the benefits or suffer the consequences of however you do. But the tape stuff, I mean, yeah, you build out rapport. I know there's a lot of them out here. They'll tell you, hey, if you start screwing something up, just literally do this, tilt your head to the side and we'll stop it real quick and we'll start over or start from, from where you left off. So you're right. They want to make you look good. It's better for them. It's better for us. So no, you hit the nail on the head.
And for our viewers out there, another important tactic, even if you're a battalion chief, deputy chief, whenever eventually somebody's going to put a camera in your face, whether you're the PIO or not, where you're going to have to give a statement. If it's taped, and I found this works, I've never had anybody say no. And I've done this for a couple of my battalion chiefs. When I was a battalion chief, I'd be walking by, they'd be getting interviewed and they'd like mess up a word. And I'd actually stop and say, hey, what do you call it? Would you mind just asking the question again so we could just be a little clearer?
Oh, yeah.
And as long as you're respectful, I've probably done it 20 times in my career. I've never had the camera person or the reporter say no. And it's just simply, I'd just like to be clear. Can you ask me that question again? First, they have an initial shock on their face. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, sure. And you're able to get that interview out. When we went to the Supreme Court, a media company, they looked at all the interviews I ever did. And they're like, we can never find a bad interview you did. I said, that's because I controlled the interview. And if I ever made a mistake, I asked them to ask me the question again when it was taped. And they were like, you asked, you did? And I'm like, yeah, they're people. If you're showing them that mutual respect, they'll ask you the question again. Like I said, I've seen it done about 22 times now. And I've been telling other people that. And I was teaching at FDIC, a leadership class this year. And someone came up to me in the hallway and said, hey, I asked the camera person to get the reporter to ask me the question again. And they did it. And it was like no big deal. And I was like, all right, so what's your tip? What's your takeaway, Greg? And have you ever asked them to ask you a question again?
Oh, only maybe like 100 times. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The other thing I love doing, and like you said, as long as you're nice, cool with them, they want to make you look good. They want to do a good interview. I will usually ask them ahead of time, hey, so what kind of questions are you gonna ask? What is it you want to know? And even like the live ones, occasionally they're going to hold back a little and give you that one zinger that you weren't really expecting. You're like, oh, okay, I better think real quick on my feet on this one. But most of the time, I'd say 95% of the time, hey, so what are you looking for in this interview? What are you going to ask? They're going to tell you literally everything they're going to ask. So you can kind of start getting your head wrapped around, all right, we got 10 minutes before we go live. These are the questions. How am I going to frame my thoughts? How am I going to word this to make, the organization look good? They want to make you look good most of the time. And like you said, Frank, if you're respectful, if you're nice to them, you're probably going to reap some benefits from that. And they're usually super cool. I very rarely found one that won't, kind of give you the pregame expectations of what they're looking for. And I've even asked them, hey, let's not ask that question. Can we go ahead and just not ask that? And most of them are so cool. They'll be like, yeah, we won't ask that. When it's kind of one of those sensitive, like, I can answer it, but like, it's going to be a difficult, I'm going to have to tiptoe around it, especially if, like you said, if we're on scene of some incident and the cops are involved and it's kind of one of those, hey, this is more a them thing. Let's just not even ask that question, and a lot of times they're cool and they won't even touch it.
It all comes down to those relationships, of having those relationships.
Totally.
In the rapport. You guys have done something unique in Orange County Fire Authority that I thought was unique. You actually walk through the fire scene and you have a video. Do you want to kind of set up this video and then we'll ask Peter if he's willing to play it? Yeah.
So, it's one of those things, right? Like we were talking about, what are different ways that we can reach the communities we serve and display to the citizens kind of how we operate on scene, what we're doing, why we do things. We try and deliver a safety message at some point in there as well, for a form of education. And so we've started doing this on quite a few of our incidents. Some of them more benign, at least benign to us in the fire service, your basic house fire, some on major incidents. And so we're, again, just looking for those different avenues to provide better outreach. So I think the video we're going to show, it was a pretty unique call. We had an individual who had barricaded himself inside a large, estate, 5,000-6,000 square foot home, and he lit it on fire while he was in there. Well, one of the challenges with that was we couldn't just rush in there, obviously, because there was a barricaded individual. The police were there, the SWAT team was there. We didn't know if they were armed, and I remember getting a call from one of our division chiefs. I was the PIO on scene, and he's like, Greg, you got to get in front of a camera, or do something. Cause he goes, the news where there's a helicopter, flying over above, and all it's showing is us just sitting there lobbing water from far away. And so I was one of those, okay, like, I did get, where's the news at? Let me get in front of this real quick. And then also, hey, afterwards, maybe after the fact, we can kind of highlight this fire and provide some information to anybody that was maybe watching the news initially and wondering why, hey, why aren't the firemen, because they normally don't they run into fires, and why are they standing, sitting on top of the engine shooting water from the top of the fire engine from far away? So any avenue we can provide, better information. And these have been very well received. And, communications internal and external, right? So these have been well received externally as well as internally. We get criticism, and critiques internally. I mean, all the time. Firefighters here that love what we're doing, or hey, that wasn't the coolest thing. Maybe we could have done that a little differently. Oh, I didn't like how you worded that. That video was lame, or that was great. And these have been very well received. So yeah, if we want to play it, I guess we could, show this one, and there's a multitude of them.
Right before he plays this, there's a question from one of the viewers, and I think it sets up nicely with what you're talking about here. They asked, what kind of legal constraints do PIOs face in terms of releasing information? So like here you were dealing with the police department. Did you coordinate with the police department to determine what could be released before you made a statement? I think that's a fitting question before the video.
No, that's a very good question. I mean, the first and biggest legal constraint we have is HIPAA, right? I mean, anything that involves releasing any type of a patient, that's got to be approved by the patient. We take that very serious. You will never see anything coming from us where an individual is featured without having their prior approval. And that's like, that is a 100% no exceptions made. And then any of these incidents where we're working with another agency, like Chief Eagle was saying, working with the Public Works on, the recent, or what was hurricane. Same with us, like this incident we're going to show. I was standing there, it was a captain for the police department, which is like our equivalent of a division chief. So very high up on the food chain. He and I were coordinating the messaging, how it's released. So everything is kind of ran by each other. And we have a great working relationship. Like Chief Eagle said, I know the sheriff's department here, they're the big agency, in our county. I know their PIOs. I know a lot of their leadership. So we're able to, a text message, a phone call. Hey, are you okay with us releasing this? And they do the same thing for us. But yeah, legal constraints, we run everything. We cover ourselves. Obviously being first.
I was going to add something to you, Greg, but I want you to finish.
No, obviously, like Frank was saying, you want to be first, you want to get the information out there. But for us, and we talk about this all the time, the most important thing is that it's accurate and that we've gone through the proper channels. For us, we'll take being second as long as we ensure that it's accurate and we have all, stakeholders in coordination and with approval. That's our most important thing.
One of the things I ran into about a legal constraint, Frank, is when you use drones and you capture footage via the drone. It's a complex issue, but is that a public record now? Does that fall under the Freedom of Information Act, where like the news media will put in a request to get that drone footage, not unlike a body camera for a police officer, depending on the circumstances. But you got to say, if you operate drones in your jurisdiction and you do have cameras on those drones that record. Some of them are just live feeds and you can just get it as you go, but some of them record for training purposes and such. That's something that the PIO definitely has got to be aware of, because what you're capturing, again, what it's going to show, all these things could have legal consequences, from tactics to procedures to, it all turns on what it's going to show.
And in a barricade situation too, you want to make sure that you're not showing something of the police getting ready to go in, or something on TV that's going to be harmful to your firefighters and cops. So you have to be aware that you don't want to be Geraldo Rivera during what was that, Desert Storm, filming the troops coming out of the ocean. They don't need a CIA, they got Geraldo. So
right. So if you got that drone operator, I'd probably have a PIO right next to him.
Right.
Peter, can you play that clip and let's take a look.
Seeing it?
We can see it.
Fire shot from the roof of this Laguna Hills home just before 11 this morning.
While en route to the scene, firefighters were made aware of the fact that there was potentially a barricaded subject inside the building that was on fire. That instantly changed the typical strategy and tactics used on a fire. Firefighters had to employ a defensive strategy working in tandem with Orange County Sheriff's Department with one goal in mind.
We were able to position ourselves in a safe location with the officers to prevent the spread of fire to the adjacent homes. And that was our main goal here, was to prevent the fire from spreading.
The fire at 27716 Greenfield Drive was imminently threatening the homes on both sides of it. I'm very happy to report that due to the efforts of both the Orange County Fire Authority and Orange County Sheriff's Department, both of those homes were completely saved. Once the Orange County Sheriff's Department was able to apprehend the suspect and deem the scene safe for firefighters, we were able to move in closer for a more effective fire attack and quickly extinguish the fire. Firefighters then began conducting overhaul operations, where we searched for any hidden hotspots of fire to extinguish. Firefighters would remain on scene for quite some time. We'd like to take a moment to thank our partners, the Orange County Sheriff's Department. With a great team effort, this incident was able to resolve in an efficient, safe manner. One final reminder, if you see something, say something. If you witness a fire, if you see suspicious activity, please call 911.
Are we back? Greg, I absolutely love that. Besides your funny helmet, I think that is amazing. I think it's a great way to get the word out. And we've seen it on a couple different house fires where you talk about smoke detectors, you talk about public safety information. And I love in that video where you talked about how, yes, we had a loss here, but we saved the exposure. And when we save an exposure, we save a building, we're also saving tax base. So I think that's real important. Brian, what was your take on that video? Because I think it's just a great way to get the word out.
Absolutely. That's awesome. You're showing how you're setting up and why you're having to do that. I think that message that you mentioned about the main cause stopping the spread, that's not really intuitive to, I guess, the average citizen about why we do that. They want to attack the fire, but sometimes you go for the exposures. I thought that was an excellent one. I know recently we had one where we showed burglar bars because our guys made a save on 2 people, but the delays getting in through the burglar bars, it helped for the camera to get a picture of that. So that image, especially with the streams flowing over the house and through there, I'm sure they're asking, why aren't you going in? So your PIO message was critical in this particular one.
Greg, I got a question on a text here. How long after an incident does it take you to put together a video of this quality to put out?
That's a good question. There are a couple factors. Sometimes I'm able to put them together pretty quick. If it's all our own footage, it's pretty easy. I got a MacBook that the organization bought us, the Shift PIOs that we can use. And I mean, we can splice this stuff together pretty quickly. But like this, we're waiting for footage. Okay, hey, KTLA, can you guys send us, a link to the footage you guys were showing? Hey, Fox LA, can you? So sometimes we're waiting on them to get us the information. I mean, once I have everything, like that video, under 2 hours. And once I have all the media that I need, I mean, as far as putting it together, it's definitely under 2 hours. So it's pretty quick. And it pays off, tenfold with the outreach we're able to achieve with that.
Well, I think that's great. We're at the witching hour right now. So that's it for today's Politics and Tactics. I got to go back to work and continue thinking. But we really appreciate having Chief Brian Sky Eagle on from the Houston Fire Department and Greg Barta from the Orange County Fire Authority. And we thank Peter Petrilla for being behind the scenes. On behalf of Fire Engineering, thank you to everybody. And Greg, we're being serious. I know Brian Sky Eagle's got a couple articles to write for us on the resiliency officer that we covered in the last show, which I think is really important, especially with all of the incidents that we're having across the country now. And Greg, if you guys could put together an article with your PR person, Fire Engineer would love to see that, because the value that you create of having a dedicated PIO, a lot of departments don't have that, and a lot of departments can learn from you. So on behalf of Fire Engineering, 2 great hosts. I'm going to tell PJ Norwood he's been replaced by Chief Brian Sky Eagle. And sorry we missed him today. And everybody have a great day. Peter, you can take us off.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Frank. Nice to meet you, Greg. Thank you, Peter.
Nice to meet you.